Okay.
Fay, you were telling us about this pathway that you were on, just being young and gifted and cute and living life and enjoying life. And meanwhile, on a parallel track, as it were, the movement is beginning to develop in the South. You said that you were sort of conscious of it as you began to hear and read about some of the more spectacular aspects. But where in your journey do you remember that movement making an impact on you, where you have to think about what this means for you?
When she asked me where I went after New York, back to Pennsylvania and joining this group, and I didn't like this magazine subscription thing. I thought the prices were too high, and I would work the black community because I was the only black person with the group. There were about 15 of us, and we traveled caravan style across the country. And they were very nice people. I had no problem with that. And I worked the black community, they worked the white community and other communities. But I didn't even want to offer people these subscriptions. I thought they were extravagantly high, and I thought it was stealing. So I would go and visit black people. So I didn't make a lot of money. And I sold a few subscriptions here and there. And sometimes people would try to keep me and say, I got a son that would like you, you know, let me take you home. So I'd go home with him and stuff and just hang out. But by the time I got to San Francisco from Pennsylvania, we had made a lot of stops, and the experience was interesting. But I decided that this was as far as I was going. And so I had $13 in my pocket. I said, I'm quitting. I found myself crying. I was standing in the doorway. And that let me know that I was in a state of depression, that something was wrong, and that I should not be with this situation any longer. So I said, $13, okay, I'm in San Francisco, I'm quitting. And I'd run into this group of people. It was a black guy, the ink's gonna get on your pants. This black guy he was an actor. He lived in this house, and then there was another guy who was an albino, Fred. I don't know what Fred did. There was a white girl. She worked and was acting, and there was another white guy. And Charles Smith was his name, the first one I mentioned. And he said to me when I came to his house to sell these subscriptions, he says, why are you doing that? I said, hey, I'm just doing it because it's something to do. So he said, you don't need to be doing that. He said, you have more important things to do in life than that.
Really?
I said, yeah, I think so too. So I said, but right now I'm kind of stuck because I don't have any money to break loose. He said, well, think about it. And if you think about it, you can come live with us, and we'll take care of you until you can get a job. So when I quit and I was in that doorway and I was crying, I said, I'll go back and knock on their door. And that's what I did. I made it back across town, knocked on the door. I said, I came here to stay with y'all. They said, come on in. So the rent there was like $65 a month, and my first month's rent was $13. And so I paid them, and that was included rent and utilities. And because of the 5 of us sharing the rent. And I called home, told them, I said, look, I'm broke. They sent me $25. And to them at that time, that was some money. It didn't mean much, but it meant something. So in the meantime, when I was in San Francisco selling, I had met people on the street, and I met this guy who was a pimp. And we would strike up a conversation and have dialogue. And so he found out when I quit this group, he found out where I lived, and every day for a month, he would come by and he would bring me a dinner and a pack of cigarettes. And he would walk in the house, because we never locked the door, and he would leave it on the radio. And then I would go, and he never asked anything of me. I never went with him, I never hung out with him or anything. We just become associates on the street. When I went to Mr. Leonard's barbecue on Fillmore, I was looking for a job. I didn't go the administrative route because I didn't know San Francisco. I didn't know what direction I wanted to go. I just wanted to get something that would just tide me over. So I went up and down Fillmore, and I went in Leonard's barbecue. And the man who was the cook there said, Mr. Leonard's not here. He'll be back later this evening at such and such a time, or you can come back and talk to him. So he said, you need something to eat? I said, yeah, but I don't have any money. So he said, don't worry about it. So he gave me this platter of food that had ribs, beef, and chicken. That must have been like 4 pounds of meat. So I took it home. We all had meat for a week. And I ended up getting a job at Mr. Leonard's. And Mr. Leonard was a fabulous, fabulous chef, fabulous man in terms of his psyche, how he operated in life. And he ran a good operation, he ran a clean operation, and the food was superb. And he cooked fresh food every day. He made his sausages on the place, on the premises, and he also made fresh pies every day, little miniature pies, apple, sweet potato, and peach every day. And we always sold out of everything every day. I learned how mean I was there, because I remember one time, I mean, I didn't know I had this in me. You know, things come to you in different phases. And when you're working in a public environment, you never can tell how the public is going to deal with you. And we were working real late. We stayed open to 2 because the clubs are closed and people would come running through trying to get something to eat. And this one man, he probably was just mentally unbalanced, but he started harassing me. Now, we had a tall counter. People didn't eat. There was only a takeout. And I couldn't figure out, why was this man attacking me? And I tried to ignore it at first, and it would go on. And then, so another time it occurred, he came back, and these hot pies were coming out of the oven. And we put them on the counter. He had said something, I don't know what it was. I took one of those pies and I threw it on him. And that was the first time that I ever knew that I had this in me. My spirit had never showed me this before. And everybody that worked there grabbed their knives and their barbecue forks, because if he talked about coming back with a gun, and they were ready for him. They told me to go in the back. And I realized some things, just an experience of how you can adapt to a situation that you don't even know you can adapt to, how you respond to situations, and how people who don't even know you will sometimes mess with you for no reason, apparent to you. It's apparent to them, but you don't have any knowledge, and how you have to deal with that. So that was strange to me, but it was interesting.
While you were out in San Francisco then, were you hearing word of what was happening in the South?
When I remember being on the bus, and I saw it was a Catholic church, and they had a sign out front on their marquee that these 4 children had been killed in Birmingham. And I said, this is it. And so I left San Francisco, and I said, I'm going to find a movement. And that's how, that was the turning point in terms of making a choice.
And did you go shortly after the children were killed?
Yeah. I went to Florida. I say the movement's in the South.
Since your daddy found, or somebody found, your granddaddy found some good fruit down there, you might as well see if you could find some movement down there.
Well, I had an aunt who lived there, so I had a place to stay. She was on Homestead Air Force Base, Clara Tillman, the one I was telling you about. And so I would stay with her. I said, well, I'm going to find the movement. So I couldn't find the movement there. So I was reading the paper. I said, well, I'm going to have to go somewhere else. But I was investigating from there. And there was an article in the paper saying there was a job at the New York World's Fair. This is 1964. So I read the article, and I called the people, and they said, we didn't advertise in the Florida paper. I said, yes, you did. They said, no, we didn't. I said, I'm looking at the ad. How'd you think I got your phone number? I was talking to the manager, and he was assistant manager, rather, to the Hilton Hotels International Restaurants, and they had a site on the World's Fair. And so he said, well, tell you what, why don't you just take a chance to come on up here, and we'll see what we can do for you. So I got on the plane the next day, put my bags in a locker at the airport, caught a cab to the World's Fair, went to the restaurant area, and I said, I'm here to get a job. So the manager came out. He was very nice. His name was Max Schmellinger, and he was German, and hotel and restaurants was his thing. So he talked to me for a while, and he said, well, you sure? He said, what kind of job you want? I said, what you got? He said, cashiers and hostess. I said, I'll be a cashier. I can count money. He said, well, hostess pays more. I said, okay, I'll be a hostess. So they made me a hostess, and I worked there for 6 months. Meantime, when I left there, I got the job that day. I called my cousin. I said, I'm in New York. She lived in Harlem at Lenox Terrace. Her name is Vivian Morton.
Is that where Ella Baker
Ella
lived?
lived there, yes.
Lenox Terrace, yeah.
Yes.
And her husband was Lee Jack Morton. Lee Jack was in Mississippi working with SNCC. He had volunteered 6 months of his time, along with a couple of other people, to go to Mississippi to set up a print shop because so they could do their posters, their printing, the literature, and the newsletters and things, and show them how it was done. So he volunteered. In 6 months, he came back, and I was in his house. And so I asked him to tell me about the movement, and he told me what he knew. Then I asked him to tell me, well, what organizations are there? I said, I know about the NAACP, and I know about the Urban League. I said, what others are there? He said, well, there's CORE, there's COFO, there's Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and it's Urban League or something. And I said, well, which one's the baddest? He said, SNCC. I said, that's the one I'm joining. So I went down. I said, where's the SNCC office? So he told me there's one downtown in New York. They had a fundraising office.
Yes.
So I went down there, and the lady was very nice. She was a young white woman. She gave me an application. I took it home and threw it in the trash. I said, I'm not going to enter the movement through white people. It's not animosity, but I just couldn't do it that way. So a couple months later, Jack had a party for some SNCC people who had come to New York to have a meeting, and there were about 30 of them. And they all came to the house. I met all the group at one time.
Yes.
And I was very impressed.
Do you remember who some of them were?
Yeah, I remember quite a few. I remember Ivanhoe Donaldson, Cortland Cox, I think Ruth Howard, Cordell Regan, Chuck Neblett, Johnny Wilson are the ones I can remember at this point. And they came, and I met them, and I was impressed at not only they were about my same age. In fact, I was older than many of them, but that they were aggressive, and they were interesting, they were partying and having a good time, and that they also were people who were about serious business.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So I never thought I would find it all like that in a combination in one place at one time, and so I was impressed. So they were, of course, began talking to me about joining the movement.
Yes.
Yeah.
About how old were you then, Faye?
I was 26.
Okay.
So I said, well, hey, that's what I've been trying to do. I didn't know where y'all were. So they went back, and they called Ruby Doris, and they told her that they had a lady who wanted to come into the movement. So she called me a couple days later, and she said, she introduced herself, told me who she was, what she was about, and then I asked me about myself and what some of my background was and my skills. So I told her mostly administrative. She says, well, we have an office in Selma, Alabama that we can't keep open because there's nobody in it, and we need to have somebody there. I said, okay, I'll go.
Yes.
So I said, where's Selma? She said, Alabama. So I said, okay. So she said, what we'll do is we'll set up a situation whereby we'll have somebody meet you and escort you to Atlanta. So when I got off the phone, Lee Jack heard where I was going, he got frightened. And he went to his bookshelf, and he grabbed Howard Zinn's book, SNCC.
Yes.
And he said, you don't want to go to Selma. Yes. And he showed me the article and the story on Selma, and I read it. I said, it's too late. I've committed, and I have to go. I don't know what Selma's like, but I had made the decision, and now it's on to the next level. So she had me meet this guy. He was I don't remember his name. He was a white guy, and we met at Penn Station. And he knew I was a total novice. He was very nice. We went to Germantown, or somewhere in Germantown area, picked up this old 1938 car full of books that these folks were sending to the South as contribution to the Freedom Libraries. And so we drove this raggedy butt car, and we got as far as Lexington, Kentucky, and the brakes gave out, and we ran into somebody. So
But you hit somebody.
Yeah, ran into the back of somebody, yeah, because the brakes did not hold.
When is this about now?
This was on my way to Atlanta. This was December 1964.
Okay.
So the sheriff came, of course. and took him to jail and took me to the jail also, but he didn't put me in jail because I wasn't driving. So the guy asked him, he said, well, she wasn't driving, she's not responsible. Can you find somewhere for her to stay other than here? So the sheriff got on the phone and he called a black undertaker. The undertaker came and picked me up from the jail. He took me to this lady's house in the community and she charged me $3 for overnight stay plus breakfast.
Where was this?
Lexington, Kentucky.
Lexington,
Yeah.
Kentucky.
So then Ruby and I talked, she knew what would happen, and they were going to work on getting the guy out of jail from their end with the little bail money and whatever. And they told me, I said, well, what do? I can't just leave him. They said, well, you can't do anything. Just get on a bus and come on to Atlanta. We'll have somebody meet you, etc. And so that's what I did. I always felt sort of bad, like I had left him in the lurch, but they said, no, they would take care of it. And they knew what they were doing, and I didn't. So I took their advice, and I'll try to keep my hand off the mic. When I got to Atlanta, I went to the SNCC office, which I think was on Ashby Street at that time, and John Love drove up from Selma, picked me up about midnight, December 31st, 1964, and on January 1st, 1965, I was in Selma. And it was an interesting time.
So you started a new life on January 1st.
1965, exactly. Yeah.
You found the movement
and found some
you.
fabulous people.
Yes.
Fabulous people. Yeah. Yes, sir. Okay.
We need to stop.
Okay.
There's a bomb threat there.
You can't.
Bomb.
What kind of bomb?
Kind of thing.
Don't put it on Gail.
I don't know if you want this on camera, but you said that you left Atlanta at about midnight one year, what is it, 64, and then, well, maybe I'll wait till afterwards, but I've been thinking about all this in terms of the Orishas.
About what?
In terms of the Orishas, the Yoruba spirits, energies, and that kind of warrior spirit that you have is very much like Oya, who is she's a female deity, Orisha, but she has very much of what some people consider kind of typical male characteristics in terms of that fighting spirit.
That's very interesting. Somebody just said that to me the other day. They didn't say about Oya, but they say you're much like a male in how you deal with things.
Yes.
And I said, what do you
and
mean?
See, what's so interesting is, they all have their little specific dance steps, and hers are like the men's, Shango and Ogun, the warriors. But that midnight period is Eshu, the crossroads deity. And that's where the change comes in your life. And for you to leave, to essentially come into the movement, not only, at midnight, but at midnight of the changing of the year, is a very, very significant kind of thing to happen. Yeah, from the African perspective. Yeah.
That year, too, 1965. So much power in it.
Interesting.
When you got to Selma, did you have a sense that now I've found the movement?
Yes. I really did before I left. When I met those folks in New York at Lee, Jack, and Vivian Morton's apartment, I thought I had found the movement. Because what I did find was a group of people who seemed to be much like myself, who seemed to enjoy life, but also could take it seriously, who felt the need for change and had already embarked upon it. And so I came upon a group of very knowledgeable people who were not selfish in their attitudes. If they had envy, I don't know what it was related to, they didn't seem to have greed. I mean, there's a lot of manifestations that were not present in their environment at the time that I was familiar with them. There wasn't a lot of hostility, wasn't a lot of nastiness. They were just folk. And I just immediately appreciated that this is where I belong. And this is a group of people that have come to me or been sent to me. It's kind of how I took it, because I've been looking for them. Now, I could have gone to a SNCC office or gone to an NAACP office or whatever, and probably run up onto another group of nice people. But SNCC people were my people. That's the way I felt about it.
And they came to you and took you
took me
right
with them.
down.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And I've always been very appreciative, you know, of Lee Jack and his efforts, and that he was there because it was like little pathways
Yes.
leading you to a situation. Yeah.
You know, there is this New Testament quotation from Jesus which comes to my mind very much as you talk. Jesus says at one point, "They who hunger and thirst after righteousness shall be filled."
Interesting, wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's what I was thirsting after.
Yes, you were.
And for people who I felt were like me
Yes.
internally. And they were.
And what were your responsibilities when you got to Selma?
Well, my responsibility was to keep the office open, man the phones, or woman the phones, as I say, keep our little bit of accounts, maintain contact with the national office and other projects. And because when I got there, this was the second time SNCC had been there.
Right.
SNCC and SCLC were working the community. It wasn't that large a community, but it was a majority black population in the county. And I found that that's how they chose the counties to work with. So if you got something done, then people would have a majority population. If they were interested in carrying it forward, they had that opportunity. Because it was so such an active environment, demonstrations all the time, conflicts with the sheriffs, people trying to get to the courthouse in organized fashion to register to vote, and they were not allowed to. You had a lot of consistency in terms of activity going on. And because of that, you had world press who was very interested in that environment. So as I was talking to people from around the world all of a sudden, from Germany, from Sweden, from Africa, from everywhere, who would give us open lines to call them any time of day or night if anything was happening in Selma, because they wanted to know what was going on. And so that was a totally new experience. Then I was also told, okay, you got to write press releases. I said, press releases? I don't know how to write press releases. They said, well, all you have to do is the first paragraph, who, what, when, where, and why. And then you tell the story. I said, oh, I can do that. So I was writing press releases. So you were given, I was put among a bunch of people who respected you from where you were at that time, okay? So whatever my skills were, they were appreciated for the skills that related to that particular situation. I also felt, and in terms of the way they acted, they didn't say this is in terms of actions, that there was always growth available. And I was there 3 months, and I was nominated by my project to serve on the executive committee of the organization. I didn't do why did he, except for 3 months. But I appreciated, they taught me something about myself, the fact that they wanted me to take on this responsibility. So that's another lesson. They used to meet, SNCC and SCLC used to meet every morning at 7 o'clock at our office. SCLC didn't have an office at that time. And they would meet every morning. I thought this was so intelligent. These two organizations would meet every morning at 7 to survey and analyze what they were going to do that day, what part of the counties they were going to work in, what they were going to be talking about, so that they wouldn't look stupid. You know, because it really would have been stupid if they had not coordinated their activities. And the field workers in SNCC and LCLC, I remember James Orange, James Bevel was the project director of SCLC's project there. And there was a couple ladies whose names I don't recall right now. But I was so impressed, coming from an apolitical situation into a totally organized environment, that these people had enough sense to do this. I was just overwhelmed. And they tried to get along because they felt the community deserved. You got two organizations working here, they deserve for people not to be met with stupid people. You deserve not to have two people from two organizations knocking on your door talking about the same thing, you know. And that was really a lesson for me of cooperation.
That's great. That area was known by a lot of people as being one of the most dangerous areas for folks who were working for change.
Mm-hmm.
Were you afraid as you were in there?
No. People used to ask me all the time. I never succumbed to fear.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that when I came into the environment, I was coming into danger.
Mm-hmm.
I knew from Emmett Till, I knew from history that danger was not something to be played with.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt that you had to take on your part. And if danger comes, then that's just a part you have to deal with when it comes that way.
Mm-hmm.
You try to, act stupid. You try to protect yourself, keep yourself in safe environments, make contact, let people know where you are, and they know where you are. You know where they are, rather,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa, so that you're not isolated. But to me, danger was just a part of the situation. I mean, I'm coming to a situation where I'm motivated by the violent death of children.
Yes, yes.
So how could I feel like if they kill children, hey, I'm not anything to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with it like that. And so I never had that kind of fear, per se. There were fearful moments, but not just fear.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time, I was there 6 months in Selma, and Cynthia Washington wanted to have a project in Greene County, Alabama. And so I wanted to experience what field secretaries did. So I asked to go work with her, and I was given permission. And we went out into the county. We found this old shack this 80-year-old black man had built. And it was just 2 rooms. It was a kitchen and another room. And there were 3 males and 2 women in our group. And the place was too small to put a bed. So we all slept on the floor in our sleeping bags. I mean, these are all experiences, but it was really healthy for me. We had a well that we had to draw water from, and the men dealt the trenches for the latrines in the back. We had to go outside for that. And then on one evening, the 3 males had gone into Atlanta. We only had the 1 vehicle, and the shack or the house we were living in was like 2 miles into the woods off the main road. So you driving through all these bushes and stuff to get to it. And one day we came home, and there was a voodoo doll pinned to the outside of the door. But we decided it was a friendly voodoo doll because it had on overalls. It had a natural. There was nothing stuck in his heart. It had a snake skin tail, the shaker attached to it. And we just looked at it and we said, people trying to protect us.
Yes.
And so you found out the experiences of being in an environment where people respect what you're doing or want you to stay there, and they were sending out the vibes to you.
Yes. Yes.
Another time, the guys had gone off and left Cynthia and I alone. They'd gone somewhere. They were going to be gone overnight. And this young black man came down from a nearby farm, and he had a shotgun with him. He says, I'll be spending the night on your steps. So Cynthia and I, we so naive. We said, what for? He said, you don't know where you are, but I know where you are. And he said, I'll be here all night. And he was there until the next morning. He taught us how to shoot the gun, and we talked until the wee hours of the morning, and then went to bed, and he left the next morning. But we didn't even know that he knew that these men had gone and left us alone. But the community knew it.
Yes.
And the community moved to protect us.
Yes.
So many things came to you in so many different ways. So the movement was not just about SNCC people or SCLC people or other people going to do something for somebody.
Right.
But it was an exchange, because we were really doing something for ourselves. That's why I was there. It wasn't about change for Fay, it's change for us, so we can all have a better environment. And you do your little bit of piece, and somebody else does their piece, and these come together as a complete puzzle.
You were
Okay. You gotta stop.